ยินดีต้อนรับสู่รายการพอดแคสต์ Plastisphere
Welcome to Plastisphere, the podcast on plastics, people, and the planet. My name is Anja Krieger. You've probably heard the mantra of reduce, reuse, recycle. And oftentimes it's that last word, recycle, that we think of when looking at solving plastic pollution. But the order of that mantra has a deeper meaning. It's a hierarchy sorted by priorities. So to reduce the waste we produce, the first and best way is to reduce what we use. If that's not possible, the second best option is to reuse, or to repair or repurpose. We already discussed these steps towards a circular economy in our previous episode. In this follow-up, we'll take a look at reuse with Froilan Grate, the Asia-Pacific Director of GAIA based in the Philippines, and Salisa Traipipitsiriwat from Thailand, a senior campaigner at the Environmental Justice Foundation. Reuse is a good way to reduce single-use plastics, like sachets, which are used in huge volumes around the world.
So sachets are small packaging of products. It's typically used for personal care products like shampoo, toothpaste, but even household products or cooking products. No, the idea is that because again, this is the claim of the industry, because people have low purchasing power, they're only able to buy the things that they need in small quantity. And this should come in small packaging, and typically these are made of plastics or multi-layer packaging. So sachets for shampoo might have a layer of plastic, aluminum. In other cases, it might be 3 layers, or it could be monomaterial, single layer as well. No, but the defining factor really is small packaging for commonly used products.
So it's really the maximum amount of packaging for the minimum amount of volume of product that you get, right?
Exactly.
Does this issue of sachets exist in Thailand as well?
Yeah, definitely. As Freud said, that's what the industry always say. We have low purchasing power, where it's in Southeast Asia. That's why, every little thing has to come in sachets, in packets. So yes, it's evident. And I think it's also throughout the global South countries as well.
When thinking about reuse, how shall we think about it? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I think it's worth recognizing that reuse comes in many forms, and many of us have been doing it, or maybe not recognizing it as reuse. And these are all valid forms of reuse. The challenge for us now really is, how do we scale it up to respond to the scale of the problem? So many of us right now have our own water bottles, and so the practice of reuse, and again, I'll speak for the Asian context, is very ingrained in our culture in terms of how we do things. So really, reuse is not new. The question for us is, how do we scale up reuse?
Could you elaborate a little bit on how that is ingrained in the culture anyways, and give us some example of reuse that you would think of right away?
So I am old enough to still remember that there was a time in my childhood where I would buy soy sauce, oil, vinegar, and from home we have to bring our own container. We have to bring a glass, typically from gin or vodka that your parents used before, and then you wash it, you bring it to the community store, and reuse it to buy these things. This was the time when sachet wasn't as prevalent. We also have a joke in the Philippines, and I think shared in Asia, is that you go home, you go to your refrigerator excited to eat ice cream, and what you see inside is fish or leftover dishes. So our mothers have really been practicing how, because the default then was not to throw things away, but how can I extend the product of this? Because this practice of throw away wasn't ingrained. So the disposability of things wasn't something that culturally we're not used to. So we keep on seeing many of these examples.
Do you remember that time as well, yeah?
Yes, and I think a lot of it is actually still exist. For example, when you go to coffee shops, and if your coffee comes in a mug, that's already a reuse system. But if you go into a cafe and then your coffee comes in, plastic cup with a cap and also straw, that's already single use. So I think it is existing. We need to recognize it. We need to be able to scale it. But I think the word preservation is also very important. Right now, there are existing reuse systems that we probably forget about, that we are very familiar with. We really need to preserve these reuse systems that are still here and not having them be replaced by the single-use culture.
Which ones are you referring to?
For example, when you go to a restaurant and right now you are still being served in washable utensils and plates, that's already the reuse systems that we need to preserve. A lot of fast food restaurants now replace them with single-use cutleries, for example. Even though they swap it to use wood or glass or paper, at the end of the day, it's still single-use. So it will have to be managed at end of life anyway, even though it is from a more eco-friendly material. So I think these are the things that we need to start thinking. And reuse is not an innovation. It's not something that we really need to come up with a new thing, but preservation is very important.
I really resonate with that preservation. I think that's the narrative that Asians would like to push because again, reuse is not something new. Reuse was the norm before. The throwaway lifestyle, the shift to single use was a more recent phenomenon. No, so reuse was there. So we have reuse practices in India, for example. You still see cutleries, spoon forks that are being passed on from mothers to their sons or daughters. So it was the norm, and it still is visible. So reuse practices, but also reuse systems. One beverage company that's popular is still doing refillable bottles in many countries in Asia, and 20 years ago, that was the only way to get soft drinks or cola and beverages. Over the past 15 years, there's a shift towards PET or single use. But what I can tell you is in some islands in the Philippines, that refillable glass bottle is still what is being practiced. So we need to preserve that and we need to scale that up because the solution is there. So when they say that reuse may not work, what do we mean by that? Reuse has worked. It's only because we tried to externalize the cost of the waste that the shift towards the preference towards single use became viable for the companies. But the moment we have them internalize the entire cost of their packaging, reuse would come out to be the better option because it has been the best option previously.
So we have this need for preserving systems that are still in use and place, not being also replaced by single-use items. What do we do about the many single-use items or like short-lived products that we are already using? How can reuse become a solution there?
So for us, it goes both ways. We have to preserve and encourage people to do this as an individual practice. Continue using your own water bottles. When you go to a restaurant, bring your own containers, or when you go to go coffee, bring your own mug. But at the same time, really push for policies that would level the playing field for all industries, all companies to participate in reuse. Because while we know that reuse long term would be best for the environment, it's best for communities, it's best for people, it's best for workers, the initial transition cost would have to be something that we have to explore. Who would invest in this? And if you have one company doing this, while the others are not doing it, they might be at a disadvantage. That is why policy should be in place. It would be good if we have a global plastics treaty that actually sets reuse as one of the solutions to explore that would then be translated into national policies, because then that creates a level playing field for everyone to just do reuse.
I agree with Freud that we really need to have anything legally binding or that would translate into national policies for reuse, because we have to admit that presently when we talk about circular economy, most of the time it is only referred to recycling. And why recycling? It's because, if you are a packaging manufacturer, if you are in the petrochemical industry, you definitely need single use so that people consume more and then you can also produce more. That's why right now we need to highlight reuse systems as you said in the beginning, there's hierarchy when it comes to management, right? And having reuse in policies, in international agreements, and also in national laws would definitely give it more power to scale for people to also jump into the business of reuse in the future, and that create the level playing field, as Freud said, so that it can be compatible not only in terms of business, in terms of economy, but also as solutions for people and planet.
One other critical element is that by institutionalizing reuse, either in the plastics treaty or in the national policies, we ensure that financing goes into making it happen. And this would mean that the money that we have for the solution goes into the right solutions like reuse instead of false solutions like waste to energy or chemical recycling. That's why it's really important to institutionalize the right solutions, because right now what we're seeing is that without these right solutions being institutionalized, financing or the money goes into false solutions. We're seeing that in Asia, in many parts of the world.
When I think of reuse, there are some things that come to mind that are like no-brainers, like taking around my glass or stainless steel water bottle, filling it with tap water, which is actually in many parts of the world, not all, but in many parts of the world, cleaner than in bottles from water you buy in the store. But I also read that, according at least to some studies, reuse can have its downsides in terms of pollution. If you have a reusable bottle for whatever, milk or some kind of orange juice or so, you bring it back and then it gets washed and cleaned. And then some studies have shown that there's actually remnants likely from the bottle caps or from the labels, which are also synthetic polymers that remain in the bottle, and that reusable bottles can have sometimes more microplastics than single use. And then, I would be like, okay, if I'm really worried about that, I might choose the single use and just throw it away and feel better. So I think that really points to the need for healthy, non-toxic reuse systems. What can you tell me about that?
So two things. First, on your first point, we're really seeing that reuse comes in many forms, and sometimes it's confusing people because we talk of reuse differently in different ways. No, so just to share that we've developed a reuse taxonomy that aligns all of us in terms of what are the different forms of reuse and what kinds of reuse are going to be scaled up and what has risk and potential in terms of health, the cost, and everything. So people could look at the reuse taxonomy as a way to align in this conversation. On the second point, that's a very valid concern. And we're seeing scientific studies to show that that is a real risk. That's already happening. No, that's a problem that we have right now. But we have to make clear that that is not a problem of reuse. That's a problem of the packaging that we use, that we chose in a reuse system that we have. Because reuse does not equal plastic packaging. Reuse is a system that allows us to use the packaging over and over again. It doesn't have to be plastic. So a simple reuse system that is material agnostic could definitely address the problem of plastic pollution on the ground. But if we care about the health aspect of it, we need to ensure that in the Global Plastics Treaty and our national policies, we're pushing for toxic-free and safe reuse. And this is where then we talk about what is the safest material. We do recognize that context in this case matters, right? For example, and again, that's why we're looking at systems, because it's not just material specific. Is your choice really a reusable PET bottle, or can we have like what they're doing in Bangkok, no, with AJF, where you have water stations where people can refill their own container. So when we look at reuse systems, it should not be tied to one packaging alone, because there are different ways to explore it. But to emphasize that the problem of microplastic is not a problem embedded in reuse, it's a problem in the material that we choose, whether in reuse and recycling or in single use.
We're not saying, we are an advocate for reuse systems and then reuse is 100% perfect. I don't think we should approach any systems in the world that way. So that's why when we have the word toxic free, that we're advocating with the Global Plastics Treaty to have that text, it's because, as Freud said, at the end of the day, we want everything that we do to be beneficial for human health, and at the end of the day it will also have good impact on the environment as well. So this is why I think that language is very important, and we hope that countries who are negotiating right now will pick up that.
I'd also like to pick your brain on another counter point that I sometimes hear, or actually hear quite frequently, about reuse. So some people argue that some of the reusable items actually have such a high environmental footprint, so to say, like when life cycle analysis is being done, that you need to use them like an improbable amount of times to really make them beneficial. So as an example, you have a textile like a tote bag, like a bag for shopping, and then there are these studies that say actually you would have to use them several hundreds or thousands or I don't know how many times until their environmental burden becomes as low as one single-use plastic bag. And I'd really like to hear what you think about that. Reusable products have a higher amount of resources that they use for initial production. And then there's also the energy and water and so forth that goes into oftentimes cleaning them. So are they really more beneficial than if we have single use and just throw that away, like burn that or landfill that if we have space, or recycle it?
I think it's very important to understand that when we talk about life cycle, and especially when people do life cycle assessment for single-use plastics, most of the time they do not include the phase of extraction. Plastics are from fossil fuel, plus a lot of chemicals that many are identified as hazardous to human health. I think when we talk about plastics versus other material, we need to start to be fairer to other materials as well, to include where plastics come from, the fossil fuel industry, the feedstock, how it is being extracted. And also at the end of the day, if we were to promote recyclable material, then we also have to talk about carbon footprint of the recycling procedures as well. So I think we need to really question how life cycle are being conducted and if it's fair among different materials.
Just to echo what Yam said, that life cycle assessment doesn't mean the same for how everyone is using it. And it's so easy to twist the numbers to fit certain narratives. And what we're seeing is that when we're looking at LCA for plastic products, most often it doesn't consider the entire life cycle. Extraction is one. So are we counting the impact on communities where extraction happens? So the transportation of these chemicals, the health impacts of these chemicals, many of which are not studied, are not established as harmful or legally toxic, but studies have shown that they are toxic. So many cases do not consider that. Second, what's the cost to communities? What's the cost to people hosting this dump site and landfill? What are the cost of these different systems on livelihood, for example? So when you burn certain materials, how many jobs do you create versus reuse, for example? So the picture is incomplete. But let's go to the basic. Just bags, for example. Reason why reuse actually has a potential is that it could highly be localized. And when you localize things, you reduce the emissions associated with the production, with the transport. Recycling would never have better impact than reuse. With recycling, you have to centralize the processing of materials. You have to travel all the way back to distribute the material and travel all the way back to recycle it. That transport impact alone would be higher already. You can cherry pick products and say that, yes, if you compare virgin cotton eco bag with a single-use plastic bag, it might have more of an impact, no? But is that the only way? We have plenty of textiles. Waste pickers are already transforming our textile waste into bags, no? And people, they say you only use your bags 10 times. Is it really the case? I've used my bags for 20 years now, no? So again, the risk is that it's so easy to cherry pick numbers and to show only portions of it to fit the narrative. Let's get real and ask people on the ground what's happening. And again, with reuse, localizing it is one way to lessen the impact.
I agree. Do you have any recommendations or tips for people listening right now? Obviously, we come from very different countries and listeners will also be situated in very different countries. But are there a few things that you think could be applicable for most of them in terms of promoting this solution to plastic pollution?
I think a lot of the times now when we think about single-use plastics, we think of convenience. But I would really, urge people to take a deep breath and think about, when you go to a restaurant and, you eat in, as I said, in washable containers, is that creating more inconvenience or is it just a narrative that we've been feeding, by those who would want single-use plastics to have a place in the world? And secondly, I think the narrative of plastics being more hygienic than other material. I think this is also something that I would encourage everyone to start questioning since, there are more than 16,000 chemicals being used to produce plastics. 4,000 of it has already been classified as hazardous to human health. When we talk about clean and hygienic, what are we really talking about there and what is the definition there? I think this is something that I would urge listeners to think about. And at the end of the day, plastics affect everyone and the pollution comes back to us. And those who have already started to join force in reducing it, keep going. I think, we can do it. And I have always believed in the power of the people. Even though you're just one person, but if you reduce your carbon footprint, you reduce your consumption of plastics, it will show, it will tell. And that's also very symbolic. We need to tell the world that we are ready for change. Because in Thailand, I've heard a lot, I have gone to so many dialogues when it comes to how do we stop using plastics? People use, industry sometimes use consumers to tell that consumers are not ready to change. And I don't believe that. I've seen so many people, even communities that I work with, are willing to change for the better.
Froy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so 3 things, building on the convenience again, that is a very, something that the industry loves to use to justify some of their decisions. One thing that I'd like to add to what Yam said is that convenience, but at what cost? At what cost to health, at what cost to environment, at what cost to people, but also at what cost on society in general. That single-use plastic is not free. We are paying for it one way or another. And there's a direct way that we are paying for it with our tax money being used to collect it, dump it, burn it. Money that could be used for other social services. So the question for us is it really convenient, as Yam said? But also, if it is, at what cost? That's the first point. The second point is that we have to resist current narratives. When the industry says that people love this, I totally agree with Yam. That's not true. In the Philippines, we have done a survey. 7 out of 10 of the Filipinos said that we need to ban single-use plastic. So there is clamor because people are seeing and living the impacts of plastic pollution every day. They are the ones who have to live with it, so they know, right? So the question for us is it really what consumers need, or is it because what's only being offered? Go to a supermarket in the Philippines and all your coffee are in sachets. Before people used to buy it in glass, and then the glass they use it as their glass at home. Now it's not an option. So you can't tell people that that's the only thing you want when that's the only thing that you're offering as an option. And last point is that reuse is one area where we could come together. When we talked with the minister from the Philippines in Busan after we presented the reuse examples in Asia, he was like, "Why are we not doing this? Government would love this. You love this. The industry would not oppose to this. Why are we not coming together?" Right? And I think that could be a message for the plastics treaty, is that there are things that we could actually work together, and let's focus on that. Let's focus on what is already happening, what has potential, what is the support of people. And if we all come together, this is a powerful tool to scale up the solutions that we have to address plastic pollution.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think I very much resonate with this thing. Did I really ask for this? Yeah, thank you so much for your encouraging messages and sharing all these insights with us. And all the best for your future work.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing the gospel of reuse.
Happy to.